Welcome to Lievi on Sports and TV. I'm Duncan Lievi, and this is a recap of the first round matches of Novak Djokovic and Roger Federer. Novak Djokovic versus Jack Draper, and then Roger Federer versus Adrian Mannarino. Apologies for any incorrect pronunciation there. Spoilers ahead, so if you've not watched those matches or don't know their results, click away in 3, 2, 1. Novak Djokovic versus Jack Draper. The match was very slippery as a theme, but the result was Novak Djokovic triumphing over the young Brit for 6, 6-1, 6-2, 6-2. A tale of two periods of the match. Djokovic before adjusting to the grass, and then Djokovic killing Draper with his immaculate serving. So first set, Djokovic was not finding his range. His ground strokes were not sharp. His movement was not crisp. He was not finding his contact point on the forehand as regularly as we've come to associate with him. But Djokovic was also not employing a lot of tactics. He was not going to the net as often as we would expect on grass. So you can pretty much label it as a Mallorca hangover, but it was still grass. But so you can call it a hangover from the clay season, continuing in the first set. But first, before going into any other detail about the second phase of the match, I would just like to give a shout out to Jack Draper because I have to contextualize what he has achieved, no matter the result. He is a home favorite, 19 years old, already getting the billing of being the successor to Andy Murray's legacy as a tennis player representing the UK. Having not done anything significant yet, having just started your career, just turning pro, making your probably a debut at Wimbledon, not sure about that, but going up against the world number one of the greatest tennis players of all time, and you have the unenviable task of facing off against that player in the first match of Wimbledon. No pressure. But that is exactly what was evident in the first set. No matter why it happened, but Djokovic was not playing up to his level, and Jack Draper played well. He capitalized on his opportunities, and he beat Djokovic in the first set. He took a set off of the world number one, being 19 years old, in his home Grand Slam, probably in his home Grand Slam debut. So that is an incredible achievement, and only for that, if for nothing else, just for that, kudos. Now, to the second phase of the match, Djokovic found his footing, tried to calm himself down as he typically does, and he found his serving. He found his serving, and of course, he found his ground strokes after that. His movement was safer. He was still slipping and falling a little bit, but he was more careful with his steps. His serving is of particular note. He went on to serve 25 aces in comparison to his one singular double fault. The first serve percentage as a whole was 78, out of which he won 87% points. That just goes to show his absolute dominant display on the serving front. His serve speeds were also up there, as you've come to expect during this year, 120 to 125 miles per hour. And he just showed, again, that his focus on extending his career and being a durable tennis player and saving his energy for the latter stages of Grand Slams and peaking at the right times, how significant how serious and earnest he is about those claims, because the serving is going to absolutely elongate his career, make him more durable, and also increase his endurance. The more free points he gets on the serve, the more energy he conserves, and the more dangerous he becomes during the semifinal and final matches of any event that he chooses to enter and grace the audiences with. So, with that said, Djokovic's serving was immaculate. I think there were two instances, one I'm sure of, where he served 4 aces, all of which were down the tee, and he won that game. And there was another one in which I think he served 3 aces, and one of them was a service winner. It was a clinical performance, and you just felt the announcement that Djokovic had arrived at Wimbledon as the defending champion, and he was going there with the sole objective of winning and equaling Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer at 20 Grand Slams. He's on a historic path. He has won the Australian Open, he has won the French Open, he has the chance to win Wimbledon, the Olympics after that, and then some people are also claiming that he should be able to win the U.S. Open with ease. I'm not so sure how. I'm not sure about how easy it's going to be, but just the fact that he is in contention to do that, what Steffi Graf did in the '80s, is ridiculous. It's just unfathomable that he is in a position at 34 years old to be able to claim that he can achieve that, or he can call that a goal, or call that an intention. He hasn't outright said that he's going to do it, but he says, why not? And that is just incredible that he's in a position to do that. And another thing that is reinforced, as has been the case multiple times in Djokovic's career, but more so than ever, you have to take 3 sets, not just as a practical requirement, but as a reminder to yourself as a player. You have to take 3 sets off of Djokovic before you can even start to pat yourself on the back. It's okay, you have momentum, you take 1 set off of him, you take 2 sets off of him in a Grand Slam. Until you have that 3rd set, you have no reason to believe that you are going to beat Novak Djokovic. Just no reason to believe that. Now, moving forward to Roger Federer versus Adrian Mannarino. Roger Federer ended up winning a very interesting match because it was Federer's return to essentially his tennis home, which is, aside from Basel, Wimbledon center court after 2 years of not being able to compete on grass. Roger Federer won in 5 sets, 4 and a little bit, because in the end, Adrian Mannarino had to retire from the match because of a knee injury, or so it appeared, which hampered his movement and his serving and his entire game, rendering him incapable of continuing. Anyway, the scoreline is as follows for Federer: 6-4, 6-7, 3-6, 6-2, 0-0. The 5th set began, and I believe Roger Federer was serving, and he got the first point on his serve. It was 15-love, which is when Mannarino decided to withdraw from the match. The statistics are as follows: Federer, 16 aces compared to 5 for Mannarino. Double faults, 3 for Federer, 6 for Mannarino. First serve percentage, 61% for Federer, 64 for Mannarino. First serve win percentage, 74 for Federer, 76 for Mannarino. Second serve win percentage, 65 for Federer, 49 for Mannarino. Break points converted, 4 out of 13 for Federer, 2 out of 8 for Mannarino. Tiebreakers won. The sole tiebreaker was won by Mannarino in the 2nd set. Receiving points won, 47 for Federer, 35 for Mannarino. Points won in total, 124 for Federer, 118 for Mannarino. Games won, 21 for Federer, 19 for Mannarino. Service points won, 77 for Federer, 83 for Mannarino. Service games won, 17 for Federer, 16 for Mannarino. Now, I also checked the stats a little while ago, and I cannot find that statistic on this occasion, but Federer ended up with more winners than unforced errors, and same was the case with Mannarino. With that said, it's an interesting match because it gives you a lens into what Federer's campaign has started off as, because you have no way to confidently claim anything about Federer's chances because of the fact that he has only played 6 matches since he's returned. So there are 6 or 7 matches, and there's just no way to predict with any certainty. The only thing you can base any predictions or forecast off of is that he is Roger Federer. And no matter how old he is, which is a loose claim to make at the very least, in my opinion, but no matter how old he is, he's always going to have a chance to win at Wimbledon because it's Wimbledon and because it's Roger Federer, 8-time champion, 12-time finalist. So, yes, I agree with that sentiment, but he's almost 40 years old. And you can see that in his game sometimes because even in this match, you had Federer moments. You had his chip in charge. You had his elegant lobs over Mannarino's head. You had the forehand clicking at certain instances. And on the flip side, you had those classic vintage Federer shanks and mistimed backhands and Federer trying to find his footing. He had no problems with his movement as such. He is slightly slower, and that is evident if you keep in mind, or in my case, if you watch a Federer match or highlights from Federer's heyday, as recently as two or 3 days ago, and you keep that in mind, and then you watch a 2021 Roger Federer match, it is very evident that he's maybe half a step or maybe a full step slower in his movement. But before claiming that that is an absolute thing, I have to say that it is still just his seventh or eighth match since his return. It's his first match at Wimbledon. He is still acclimating to the surface. He is getting used to the conditions. He's getting used to playing in front of fans. He's reintroducing himself to his hallowed home of tennis, which is the center court at Wimbledon. So give it time. And for Federer fans out there, the best thing is that he has progressed no matter the way in which he won. Now, going through the sets, the first set, Federer was rather good. His serve was deserting him at key points. His serving was not as regular or as consistent as you would think because he was missing the first serve on many occasions. His first serve speed was up, which is a good sign for anyone keeping track of his serving since his return. He has been serving much slower than usual in his most recent matches, which was probably a safeguard for him, a precaution that he was trying to preserve his knee, or maybe keeping his back protected during the service motion, or instead going for spot serving without giving himself the full service motion flair that he usually has, extending the arm fully, whatever the reason might be. But his serve speed was back up. I saw many instances of 123 miles, which roughly is about 200 kilometers an hour or nearby. I also saw him hit 124. So he's capable of doing that, and he's slowly getting more faith in his body. That said, first set, Roger Federer claimed it off of one set point on Mannarino's serve. Next, we had the next set was much closer. You still had the feeling that Federer was trying to just move as he used to move. Because if you again put it in context, you are talking about one of the greatest tennis players of all time, the greatest tennis player on grass, returning to his home and home surface and trying to play the way that he expects himself from himself. And in the beginning, for various reasons, he's unable to do so. It is a very weakening situation. It would make you feel almost as if someone cut off your arm, or someone is making, or that you cannot perform the way you could. It is a very emasculating feeling. And for someone to go through that, the growth pains in a comeback, it's a fascinating experience to be able to watch that in front of you. Ever since he returned at Doha, then Geneva, where he lost in his first match, then the four matches at the French Open, where he did not lose, and then he withdrew for the sake of the grass court swing. It's just a narrative that is continuing, and he has to be patient with himself, which is something he reiterated after his second round loss to Felix Auger-Aliassime at Halle, where he became very negative about his chances, and he did not give every point its due. He had already gone into a negative mindset. So that is something that he has to deal with, given the fact that he's almost 40 years old, coming back from two significant knee surgeries. So it just remains to be seen how patient he has to be. I have no expectations from him with regard to him reaching semifinals or finals or whatever stage there might be. It's just good for him that he got the chance to play on his beloved grass, getting used to the conditions. And in the end, he triumphed. Now, on to how he triumphed. Second set went into a tiebreaker, as I mentioned. During the tiebreaker, he did not play well. He was committing errors, and Mannarino had risen his level, had increased his level. So he had found angles on the backhand. He was pestering Federer with the angled backhand, going to Federer's forehand, but Federer was also standing a little further back in the baseline for some of those points, which resulted in him being unable to scoop the balls back up. And the transition play from Federer was not up to scratch as you would come to expect from him. Well, on average, not in 2021. The third set was also pretty one-sided, I would say, in favor of Mannarino, who was playing very steady. He was committing his errors as well, but he was relying on his steady backhand and his reliable yet unspectacular but very potent in certain situations. Serve. His serve was, I'd say it's a bit of a deceptive serve because you do not expect him to have any explosive power, but out of the blue he can come up with a 121 mile an hour down the tee and score an ace. On the whole, though, his serving performance would be mediocre, but in the third set, I believed he raised his level. And fourth set was when Federer found his footing again. He was moving significantly better. He was returning Mannarino's serve much better, and he was able to find his groove. His forehand was firing better, getting more angles. The cross court forehand was hitting its mark. The constant shadow of errors that you come to expect from a Federer match this year continued. He was committing a lot of shanked errors off the forehand, backhand, also relying a little more on the slices, it seemed. Lack of confidence on the backhand, that is something that he can probably focus on as a priority because people will try to, his future opponents will try to pester him on the backhand side and break down that backhand over time, which was uh, which was something that was notably different in 2019, where he was very confident on the backhand wing, and he was able to fend off any repeated attacks on that side. The fourth set, at the end of the fourth set, when Federer was beginning to play up to, I'd say, 50% of his level, was a potential. Something unfortunate happened where Mannarino fell on the grass and hyperextended his knee, and he fell to the grass, and he took a while to get back up. And immediately when he started to play again after I think five minutes was with his physiotherapist, it was just evident that he was not going to be able to find the groove again because he was just unable to do so. He was injured. His movement was hampered. His serve was significantly worse. He could not find the extension, the drive, the leg drive during the serve. Serve speeds were down. He was essentially just standing and delivering his rally shots, his returns. So the match was essentially over. The fifth set, like as I mentioned in the opening, Federer was serving first in the fifth set. He scored 1 point, and Mannarino decided to retire after that. Rightfully so. It's a very unfortunate situation where an opponent or a player has to retire because of injury. It's never a good thing to have to see, but there was no other option for Mannarino. Federer, in his post-match interview, very humbly said that Mannarino was the better player for the majority of the match, and it's a shame that the match had to end the way it ended up finishing. But Federer, if you were talking just in terms of outcomes, he got some match play and he gets a chance to move on to the second round and hopefully continue his campaign at his favorite event on the tennis calendar. As for expectations, I do not expect Federer to make it past the third round, because just because he seems to be off. The timing seems to be off, but it's also true, practically true, that he's just come back. He's almost 40 years old. It takes a lot of time. Not every return is akin to 2017 Roger Federer. He just returned and took over. So that is incredible. That is an unprecedentedly fast and dominant return that I do not expect this time around for a variety of reasons. Not the least of which is the fact that Federer has gotten up there in age. Even Djokovic in 2018 and 17, he took a whole year, almost a whole year, to return to the level that he's used to. So based off of those things, Federer will have to be extremely patient to give himself the best opportunity to succeed, to be close to what he expects himself to be. It just remains to be seen. But as a fan of the sport and fan of the style that Federer plays, it's just great to see him back at Wimbledon, and the next round is going to be incredible, where you see him either finding his groove or struggling again. Either way, there's no minus here. He's getting more match play, he's getting more miles on the odometer, as they say. So it's going to be fascinating to see Federer's run because this Wimbledon has two major narratives. One being Djokovic going for 20 and continuing his campaign for the calendar Golden Slam as they call it, and the other is Roger Federer returning and trying to justify withdrawing from the French Open with the goal of Wimbledon. Was it justified, and how much he can live up to his own expectations and what it means for his future. I believe he still has some things left to do with regard to his own personal goals in the sport. But we'll see how those get affected. But those two main narratives are informing this men's draw, and it's very fascinating. I will probably see you for the second round results of both players' matches. Until then, this is Duncan Lievi, and I will see you soon. Cheers.